Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a Puerto Rican podcast talking mainly about Star Wars and other nerd-related media. Today, we return to our ACOLYTE Thursday episodes, not a creative name. We're not the Resistance Broadcast. We're not Star Wars Explained. We're not creative with our puns. But indeed, here we are, talking about ACOLYTE, episode 4. And to join me today, we have a very, very special guest, which I think is a perfect guest for today's episode. It's Eleanor from Daughters of Ferrix. Welcome.
Thank you very, very much for having me.
It's great having you. When we were organizing like all the guests that we were gonna have, it's always a gamble because we don't know like what episode's gonna, be on for which guest. But I feel like today's was spicy enough that we can have a lot to talk about. So I'm definitely very, very excited to talk about episode 4 of the Acolyte Day, which I suspect the next one or one of the episodes that will come afterwards will be called Night because Leslie's talking about the dualities with her twins, but we'll get to that in a minute. And before we talk about our reactions and our review of this episode, Eleanor, you haven't been with us on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your Star? We always like to talk about people's Star Wars journey when we have a new friend on. So I see your background. You have like so much variety. You have Alphabet Squadron. You have The Last Jedi. You have High Republic. So obviously a big fan of all the different eras of Star Wars. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into this galaxy far, far away?
So I think everyone of a certain age is kind of introduced to Star Wars as a kid, right? And so I had sort of a relationship to the films. I know that I had seen them. I know that I had the first two Lego video games for the GameCube. And I didn't play Complete Saga. I only played the actual first two. And so that was a lot of my exposure to Star Wars was kind of adjacent. Had this like fascination that I didn't really figure out because when I was growing up, it was the mid 2000s, and what Star Wars was to me like Revenge of the Sith, Force Unleashed, like all of this stuff that I will be honest with you, at the time I did not get. I didn't get it. It didn't feel like it was for me, and so it wasn't until I was a teenager, kind of seeing the sequels come out, rediscovering, like, my genuine passion for the original trilogy, and then learning to love the prequels for what they are, learning to be really engaged in the books and the comics and kind of the paratext that I sort of inculcated myself into. I realized I was a Star Wars fan already,
Mhm.
and that I'd been kind of swimming in it for years without even considering myself a fan. Like, other people in my life were like, "Oh, yeah, you're a Star Wars fan," and I was like, "No, I'm not." And so now I'm here, like, a decade later,
Mhm.
and, better for it, I would like to think.
Yeah, how does that because it's interesting, especially with the charged narratives and the charged fandom and the charged political environment, right? Because I definitely feel, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the episode a little further, that definitely the charged political climate we have is charging the fandom itself. It's kind of like a feedback loop in that way. So it's I've always said this in previous episodes. It's kind of like the boiling frog analogy, like for fans like me, I have been in it since we can remember. You kind of know that it's around, but it's so normalized that you're just swimming in it. So how does it feel, kind of being like, for lack of a better term, of a passive fan, and then kind of coming into fandom in a more serious way? How has that been a shock for you in terms of seeing how the fandom is as an environment for this world that is, about love, right? It's about love, it's about hope, it's about coming together, and then fandom kind of isn't that way in many regards, and others very much so. But how has that been for you coming in it from the outside, so to speak?
I think when I started, like, spending a lot of time on the internet, I was, like, on the much younger end of online users at the time. Like, I just kind of got really used to, like, forum culture
Mm,
and sort of discussion culture, with people who were a lot older than me. Like, I am not a millennial,
mm,
uh, but I was, like, the way I engaged in culture was alongside millennials, and so that's kind of the viewpoint I had.
mhm.
That's the viewpoint I had of Star Wars. I remember when the universal line, the line that made it onto talk shows and sitcoms and all of that was, like, sheer prequel revulsion,
Yep.
and I think knowing that that was kind of how things worked coming into it and knowing how violent, um, I guess Star Wars fandom could be, there was never a point where I was where I didn't know, um, where I didn't know that it was, like, a very charged atmosphere, like you say. It did definitely, like, the end of 2017 came around, The Last Jedi came out, and just the sheer backlash to that was completely different than I think anyone was really expecting,
Mhm,
and that was one of those, like, "Oh, the way that people talk about media is completely different, like, it's completely
mm,
changing online." But I think the bad vibes have a lot more to do with the way that we a like, as a culture, are online, and
mm,
less to do with Star Wars, actually. Like, no, none of us are normal about Star Wars, and so that
mm,
contributes to
mm,
it, but I
mhm.
really think, like, I don't know, people are rancid everywhere. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Yeah, you'll find no arguments from me on that point. And to then further that, you have your own podcast, which is Daughters of Ferrix. And for those who are normies or regs or whatever you want to call it, Daughters of Ferrix is a very direct reference to probably my favorite Star Wars show, which is Andor. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast? And I know some people claim that Star Wars isn't political, and I know that that's absolutely not true. And your podcast, based on, you know Andor and the discourse you have, is very much aligned to the politics within and without Star Wars. So why don't you tell us a little bit of your POV coming into your podcast and what your podcast hopes to achieve?
So Daughters of Ferrix is sort of a hybrid show, that takes, like, my experience with Star Wars, the amount of time I spend watching and reading and discussing Star Wars and participating in Star Wars community, and marries that with my own interest in, like, political science and philosophy and all of this stuff, and my co-host's experience as a political science student, as a person who is familiar with, like, history and stuff. And I think when I've never put it this way, but I think this is part of it. When you are transgender online, you are kind of immediately embroiled in a political sphere.
Mhm,
Your very existence is one of a political nature. And so I've had this, like, this interest in political media for a while, and I've never been able to divorce that from how I enjoy Star Wars. And obviously there's this very silly line that we hear all the time and that we make fun of incessantly, which is this idea that Star Wars is somehow magically apolitical. And
mm,
that's not true for media in general, but it's aggressively not true for Star Wars because at
mhm,
the very least Star Wars is about war. Star Wars is about the type of conflicts that powerful systems engage with together. And I think I think Star Wars lends itself to political conversation so neatly because, one, it's decently old at this point. I mean, we are over 45 years old. And
mhm,
two, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of different angles you can take to talk about the politics in Star Wars. And so sometimes what we do on my show is talk about something in universe. What's the political structure of this organization? What's the political structure of the Empire? What is the in-universe fight for droid rights like? Other times we will take sort of an audience's perspective. What can we learn from this? What are the thematic readings we can do? Um, and I think the best part about that avenue is that the the things that you can talk about are basically endless. I have a list of episode topics that's like 30 items long,
Mhm.
and it's stuff that I probably won't get to for months and months, if not years. Um, but yeah, it's kind of this like high concept. Don't get me wrong, it's very silly. It's an entertainment show. We'll
Mhm.
talk about very serious topics, and then we'll have to turn around and talk about like
Mhm. Mhm.
Darth Vader, and that is inherently absurd. But yeah, it's just kind of it is sheer conglomeration of passions for me.
And I think that's great because I think that's where the more interesting conversations of Star Wars can occur. Because I remember kind of going when I was, I mean, not to make it too much about my experience, but I remember when I was going to apply for panels for Star Wars Celebration and kind of seeing the majority of the ones that would be featured, and it's just like Boba Fett's helmet or whatever, and it's like really, that's like there's so much nuance to this, and in the climate that we're in, where we're having so much more evolved or more comprehensive conversations about how we engage with media and what that means to us, to then see just the same old white guys just be talking about the same old things about like who's the biggest bad, for lack of, for, 'cause I don't want to be too grotesque here, but uh, who's the baddest Mandalorian around, or who's the baddest Sith around? And it's like, really, that's it. It's just talking about all the Wikipedia articles that you've read that now you've turned against because apparently that's a thing fandom does now, turn against Wikipedia. So there's definitely a vacuum of nuanced conversation about what Star Wars means, can mean, and how it reflects society and the conversations that we have. So I think your podcast is definitely very important to have, because in a landscape dominated by just a bunch of white guys talking about the same trite subjects, it's definitely important to have like diverse voices and voices that also talk about nuance, because I think a lot of people are very focused on facts, and that facts somehow make your fandom or the way you engage with fandom and media more important than someone else's take, because you know facts instead of how you understand and I hate to use this term, but the literacy of the media presented to you. So thank you for your work, it's great, and I wish that there were a lot more engagement with that kind of work as opposed to the rage bait hellscape that we're in.
I
um
mean, likewise to Triad of the Force, I think
oh,
it's really
stop it.
important to get out there and to be coming at this stuff from a different perspective because, like, I will be entirely honest, there are ways in which my Star Wars fandom is predicated upon the very silly, Star Wars loving work of white dudes in the mid-2000s, but,
Mhm,
like or in the '90s or in the '80s, like, we are all kind of built upon that foundation,
mhm,
whether we
mhm.
like it or not. And
I
but
mean, the
I'm
person who created it is a white dude, so
he's a part of it. I'm very grateful to people like you for just being a breath of fresh air in the space.
no, it's like Lando said in Rise of Skywalker, which love it or hate it, that movie, that line is a good one. Is, there are more of us, and it's true. So all we can do is just hold hands and get through it together. Um, so let's go into the meat and potatoes. Episode 4, Day. Uh,
Hey.
I thought last week's episode was gonna be the most controversial one. Don't get me wrong, it was, but apparently this one somehow it's breaking the internet, or at least breaking Twitter, as we've seen today for some reasons beyond my comprehension. While I was watching the episode, I thought, and like I want to get this out of the way because we can get into the good stuff instead of just going around in circles with all the toxicity of fandom. But honestly, when I was watching the episode and then Osha asked Jackie about Basil, I don't, my pronunciations are always wrong. I apologize. And she asked like, "Oh, who is he or them?" I thought that was the thing that was gonna destroy the internet. I'm just like,
Oh.
oh, I'm like, they used a pronoun in a Star War. Oh my god, the bigots are gonna come tomorrow. Lo and behold, no one even picked up on that because they're probably too stupid to pick up on it, and they just focused on the thing that I thought would bring joy to both sides. Kiadi Mundi, old dickhead, broke everybody. and I was just like, hey, it's just a guy, and I'm just like, maybe it's not even Kiadimundi, maybe it's just another Syrian, because there are more than one. A species has more than one person in it. So lo and behold, the credits confirm it's Kiadimundi. I'm like, hey, isn't that cool? An inconsequential character from the prequels that kind of look cool is also an inconsequential character in the background of a series, and somehow people latched onto it, and just the hate brigade came out in full force. Not even Basil could rescue everyone with his cuteness. What's your reaction to seeing that in fandom? Is that do you think in your mind it's kind of a testament that the show is kind of good, maybe that people are just focusing on a background character whose birthday has never been confirmed in canon from a CD-ROM reference, that is the only thing that had that birthday from a franchise in which even George Lucas said continuities for wimps, and would just change things on a whim's end. How did you react to that? Because for me, it's one of those things that I'm having a hard time grasping.
I I wish I could say I was disappointed because I don't know. My reaction to seeing Kiadi-Mundi, initially it was, "Oh, hey, look, a new Sarian character,"
Hmm,
because
hmm,
I assumed that it wasn't Kiadi-Mundi. I was like, "That kinda looks like Kiadi-Mundi," but I just assume he's a different guy. Wasn't a different guy. Turns out people had to tell me he wasn't a
hmm,
he
hmm,
was a different, or he was the same guy. Um, but I feel, and maybe this is unfair of me. I feel like it is a testament to how short this episode was
hmm, hmm.
that this is what people are latching onto, because obviously the things that a lot of people are mad about, with regard to the Acolyte, are incredibly arbitrary. Arbitrary at best, in very bad faith at worst,
Hmm, hmm,
and
hmm. Agreed.
I think people who have decided that last week's episode was an affront to all of their sensibilities are exclusively hate watching at this point, obviously. And so when they see a thing that they like, because this isn't a thing that they want to like, this isn't Star Wars to them. They're like, "Oh, this is desecration." When it's just Mundi having some lines. I don't know. He is, like you said, inconsequential in this
Hmm,
episode. He's pretty inconsequential in the prequels.
hmm, hmm,
He has some lines that people meme, but that's it. But it's like this attachment to the things that they know, and so when it shows up in a context that they don't like, it is automatically, uh, an affront to them. And, if there's something that you can latch onto where it's like, "Oh, this changes something, it's different, there's a change in continuity," they wouldn't like that he was there even if, you
hmm.
know, in the was it the DVD? I feel like there was also, like, a book that had something, like,
It's like
none
for
of it
me,
is canon.
for me, it's like who cares? Because
Well, and it's like
reference books change all the time. It's not. Wasn't new in the '90s. It's not
I
new now.
mean, the Chuds don't like to hear this because they don't like these books, but the High Republic went and extended, well, the Acolyte already kind of extended the lives of Miri Allens, but, the High Republic also played into that. Um, the High Republic established Oppo Rancisis and Uriel
Hmm,
Poof as all these, like, extremely long-lived members of the Jedi Order, which I think is fun. Sure, why not? Like, yeah, is it a change? Is it a little hokey to be like, "Hey, look, these guys are still around?" I guess, but I
but
don't
Star
know.
Wars is hokey to begin with.
I like Uriel Poof. I think
I
he's funny. I like those robot chicken
Yeah,
shorts.
hell
So,
yeah.
like,
I was
who's
rewatching them
hurting?
today. I'm just like, oh yeah. Oh, now it's a council. I love it. It's so good. That was my criticism, and it's just to be stupid. I mean, it's like, hey, you put Keanu Monday and could you have had Gerald Poof just come in and crack jokes? I mean,
That's
it's
what
like
I said.
I'm just like that's weak, Leslie, weak. Uh,
Maybe I'm just biased because I don't like Mundi very much.
I
I
just
wanted I wanted Oppo Rancisis. He's
I'm
around.
but he would have been complicated because he's just slithering around, you
A
know.
huge pain in the ass
Yeah,
in a production way.
it's a no, no. I mean, it would be cool. Don't get me wrong. I'm just more of a Gerald stan myself,
Okay.
especially since as Living Force, and then it, I think it was because that it was in High Republic, Shadows of Starlight. issue one, when there's something that happens, and then if you look in the background, like Gerald's face of shock was so absurd that I'm just like, that's Mike Lupchitto right there. That's him.
Oh, he was so good in The Living Force. He was the best part of that book.
Well, and
Him
that's
and
and that's
Yaddle.
and that's a great part too, because like they show that he is so long lived that then he has to kind of change personalities because he's just bored with how he is, and he went from being serious as being a little goofball, and then you go back to Chiarimonde and he's the worst, and I'm just like, that's great because some
So he
people
can't
just
be that
can't
long-lived
change.
because he's the same guy for 100 years.
Exactly, but it's great, and it's one of those things where I thought that people would, especially most of the people that are hating, I think, a new Star Wars canon are prequel babies and people like
Mhm.
millennials and Gen Z that grew up with prequel trilogy, and they grew up with being told that the prequel trilogy sucked by the Gen X and all those things, and now they're kind of perpetuating that. It's just like, well, I got beat up as a kid, so now I must beat up the next ones. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, well, but this show is giving, it just gave you a prequel character. Isn't that, aren't you happy? And it's like, no, there's nothing that will make them happy. And I think it's a testament to why Lucasfilm can't cater to them anymore, because they won't be. It could be George Lucas coming back and have done this exact same show and also have put Chiari there, and they still would have revolted for some reason.
I think
So
we would all be even more unhappy, like, on average, if George Lucas was doing stuff. I like George Lucas, but, like, the reason he sold Lucasfilm was because it was, like,
the
the
exact
fandom
same
was
thing
a
is
living
happening
hell,
now.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone hated him.
Yep.
So,
So I think
I
that's
don't
the big
know.
irony of everything. It's just they're doing they're the same ones that scared George Lucas away with their behavior, and now they're perpetuating that same behavior in ways that are horrible, horrible, because it's not a way you would ever treat a human being face to face, and the
No.
anonymity of the internet just allows you, well, not allows you, for some reason you think it allows you to just be a horrible human being. And I think there's a difference between good faith criticism, and I welcome it. I always want to have like spirited discussions, and there's a difference between that and just blind hatred, which is funny again from a franchise in which the Jedi preached against hatred and how that, and attachment, and how those things lead to the dark side, and then they're attached to how they view things, and it leads them to hate and absolutes. And I'm just like, my dude, you are just, you know, not seeing the irony of how you're engaging with it. But yeah, how do you? Not to keep beating a dead horse on this, but any final thoughts on this whole Chiari Monday uh, shit show, and how fandom and social media has ruined Star Wars discourse? Well, the ruined good faith Star Wars discourse, because discourse is still around. It's just a dumpster fire.
I do want to pay a word to the fact that it is fun to be able to know things. It is fun to have
Mhm,
facts about Star Wars that we categorize and understand. It is fun for those things to be kept consistent, both in like within canon and legends to canon.
mhm,
Like that is enjoyable. That is
yeah.
cathartic as a fan, especially if you've been a fan for 20, 30, 40 years.
Mhm.
I fully understand that. I get being disappointed.
That being
But what
said.
we're talking about isn't disappointing. What we're talking about is people using any excuse to be angry at stuff that they can. Like, how many people who are being angry about Kiadi Mundi in the Acolyte
Mhm, mhm.
knew his Legends age before they looked it up on Wikipedia, right? Like
Exactly.
people do look things up to get mad at. People do make up a guy to be angry at.
Yep.
And for what? The Acolyte has its own identity, but it's kind of the most prequely show that we've gotten.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Isn't that the thing that you like? Like,
The
I think it's possible
badass
that
Sith that's coming in,
yeah,
wrecking it's like everything you wanted is what this show has been giving you.
a Jedi Order with sticks up their own butts, like,
Mhm.
come on. Isn't this
Lots
isn't
of
this why
lots of
Kiadi
Jedi.
Mundi?
Yep. Yep.
So,
It's
I don't know.
disappointing, but all we can do is just ignore. I know some people like to say that we need to confront them, and I'm just like, they don't. I mean, they want you to confront them because then they can just double down on their narratives. And I think that for me, one of the best things that I do with my socials is just ignore them, because the more I ignore them, the less they interact with me. And I'm just like, yeah, like I'm not gonna fan that flame. It's just like you want a platform, and I will not give it to you, especially when you are not engaging in a good faith way. So it's just like, why would I even waste an ounce of my time from your negativity to try to respond to it? Like sometimes I am riled up. It's like, I need to respond to this absurd comment. He's like, why? They're winning if I do that. I'm giving in to letting my emotions be dictated by them as opposed to just like taking a deep breath and enjoying my fucking life.
I cannot tell you. I heard someone once say that blocking is self-care. I
Mhm,
have thousands of Twitter
mhm,
accounts blocked. And granted, a lot of that is for, like, bigotry. It's almost
mhm,
never
mhm,
like, "You disagree with me on the Star Wars." No, it's
mhm.
like, "This person is being weird in my mentions. I'm gonna look at their profile, and they've said something
Yeah,
horrendous
horrendous.
about
Yep.
a woman." Yeah, and so it's like, "Okay, n none of you." But, like, I don't know, to be able to disengage, to be able to let go, I think is essential. And, hey, who knows if I'll be able to let go in 15 years when they decanonize my favorite thing from episode 7 of Andor, like,
You'll have the Blu-ray and you'll be able
I'll
to
I'll
watch it.
I'll I'll be but maybe I'll be the asshole.
No, no,
I doubt it.
we're
I doubt I'll care.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna be better than our parents. But anyway, for anyone listening, yeah, that was a big that I tried to talk about, but it's important to talk about it because this is how we engage with fandom and what's happening with fandom with the show as it evolves. And I think it's one of the great things of having week to week episodes. And we'll talk about how that functions with an episode like today's for sure. But let's finally dive into the meat and potatoes. Episode 4, reaction. What did you think? Did it do it for you, or was it a miss? Was it a hit? What? Tell me everything you thought about it.
It was a little bit of neither. I
Uh,
like where it's going, I like what it's doing, I think it's making good choices, but I said it before, I think this episode was just too short, and I try to be really forgiving of the shorter episodes. I didn't think the short run times were bad for episodes 1 or 2, like, those were not on the longer end. I thought that was they were totally fine. I know they came out the same day, but, like, I thought they were totally fine.
mhm.
But this one, I felt like it ended on this cliffhanger, but it kind of ended without climax. It ended without a lot of a like a rise and fall of a narrative arc. And so I like what this is doing for the larger story, but and I think it's good that this is a week to week show. It's good to be able to discuss it. It's good to be able to talk about stuff.
Mhm.
I like this format. But it is a little bit of a bummer when we get one like this that genuinely I think leaves me a little bit unfulfilled.
It
So,
I really like this episode, but I don't disagree with you, and I think that it's definitely a and I have to compare it with Andor, and I hate doing this because I think every show should kind of like breathe on its own because and it's what I really appreciate about all the Star Wars shows thus far is that each one it's its own thing. You know, they're not cut. They're not kind of like, and this is not a diss at Marvel at all, but they're not kind of like all the Marvel shows where they're kind of like cut from the same cloth, and they're all kind of superhero shows. There's obviously your Loki's and one divisions out there that are kind of like cut above the rest. But Star Wars, like each one is so distinct. Like Mandalorian's the Western, Book of Boba Fett is whatever it was. Obi Wan Kenobi is a wonderful coda to the prequels. Andor is the spy thriller. This is the murder mystery. Like every one of the Star Wars shows like have their own flair and they deserve to stand on their own. That being said, however, I think that Acolyte and Mandalorian for that matter, and Obi-Wan, like a lot of them are suffering from streaming fatigue. I guess I don't know if
mhm.
there's like a term for it right now, where like it's just streamlined. This is like 8 episodes, and you're just gonna get through it. And they were just designing the series to be a binge model, even though we're releasing it week to week, but we're kind of it's binging. It's just like 8 episodes. Let's move on to the next season and the next show. And I think that's a disservice to storytelling. I mean, I'm not saying that every show needs to be kind of like it was when cable TV was at its height, and every show is like 18, 24 episodes. But I think that Andor found that really that sweet spot, man. And, like, I thought 12 episodes was just like delicious because we just got so much nuance to every episode and so much development that I feel like by the time we got to the end, we were like, that was satisfying. Like the last episode of season one and on a cliffhanger. You're goddamn right, but it felt earned. It felt like a good cliffhanger because it's like, fuck, like that was the culmination of Cassian's journey, and he made a decision finally. He became an active agent in his own story for the first time in episode 12, and I feel like Mando season three, like, what was, I think it was also 8 episodes, so it's just by the end, you're like the Mandalorian war with, I was gonna say Grief Karga, apologies, sorry, nerds, with Moff Gideon just ends, and you're just like, "Oh, so nothing happened?" So we went through 8 episodes and nothing happened in all of them. You just have Din in a hut somewhere doing nothing, and I fear that that's what's gonna happen with Acolyte. It's just gonna be a rush to the finish line for episode 8, because while I think there's a lot of really good things that the show is developing, nothing really has had kind of an opportunity to breathe. And while I really like, for example, like I really liked episode 3 in terms of like taking us back and looking at May's memory, Osha's memory, sorry, because it is Osha's memory. It's not just a flashback. It's Osha's memory. I'm dying on this hill until proven otherwise. But it wasn't tethered to the main story, so it felt like unsatisfying, at least to me in that way. I want to see your thoughts about that episode because it's just like it's isolated with that, and then there's no string to everything. So you're kind of like left in this bubble of like, okay, but where are the strings? I know that the strings are there, but I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like I'm a little rambly right now. But in a sense, I feel like that was happening with episode 4. It's just like it's rushing through these things, and then all of a sudden May has her change of heart with Kamir, which I think was really interesting, and we'll talk about. But then all of a sudden the episode ends, and I'm not saying that cliffhanger ending is bad. I just feel that the show is gonna feel better on a binge, and I feel that that's a disservice to standalone episodes. What do you
I
think?
was saying the same thing, like, right after the episode is I was like, I know my taste in things. I'm gonna like this significantly more even when there's an episode next week.
Hmm.
And that's what I said last week. I said because as much as I enjoyed having a much more fleshed out setting, there were a lot of unanswered questions at the end of last week's episode, and I missed the, like, present day setting. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think what these episodes are doing is telling a compelling story over a season, and what they're not doing is, for me, giving, like, a super complete experience in a single episode, and that has its benefits and its drawbacks, but I don't know, I do think these shows are in this really tricky situation where you do kind of have to make it so it's like, okay, they can go back and it's compelling to watch all in one go for all of the people who come after release. But then, when it's in the press, when it's airing, you want to make it fulfilling at that point. And so, like, I have no idea how you do that as a writer. That sounds really difficult. Um, but yeah, I'm worried is the wrong word, but I am curious to see. I feel like either you have to wrap up the story much too quickly, or you have to leave a lot of things undealt with, which
Hmm.
Leslie Headland has talked about at least wanting to do a second season of the show. I would quite like it if this were like an ongoing project, like
Hmm.
with an uncertain end. Like, I think it's nice that Andor has this like cap at 2 seasons, that they were really clear about that. But I would love if there was another show like we have The Mandalorian, which is just kind of open-ended, which could go
Mhm,
any
mhm,
direction, and I'm sure the creator would have ideas about where to go, but I'm fine with having an ongoing series like that. However, this is the type of story that I want just enough answers to keep that catharsis going, to keep my own, like, investment there, and that is what I hope this show does. It doesn't have to tell me everything by the end of the season, but I want them to give me enough that I feel like this piece of it is satisfying. And I agree, 8 episodes is really pushing it, especially when, at least probably 2 of those episodes in the end will be dedicated to important context, but not the ongoing, like, contemporary right now plot.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, People are thinking that episode 7 will probably be the analog to episode 3, the sort of flip of the coin side,
Right.
with our single titles here. I hope people are right about that. I would really like it if that's how that ends up.
I definitely have liked the title structure because it definitely tells us a lot about the story and the
Mhm,
characters and like what their motivations are and how they're mirrors to each other because the first two episodes had like the hyphens and it's like
mhm.
the dual concepts within both twins. Outside with these single episode titles, you kind of want the payoff of the opposite title to happen.
I
So
want to know that there is an opposite title. I'm over here like, I'm a little bit worried that I'm gonna be wrong, that everyone's gonna be wrong about that.
I
Not
definitely think
really.
we're gonna get it, especially because I think we're not maybe not gonna get it like in the way that we think, which I think is also a problem about how we engage with these shows because we make up our theories, and if they don't happen, we're angry. And it's like
Mhm.
for me, it's great because I'm like, hey, usually what they come up with is better than what I can ever
Oh, I love
uh,
to be surprised. I
dream
can
up
never
with.
come up with anything I'm satisfied with.
But at least with the memories, and Leslie has said this in previous interviews, she has said that it's kind of inspired by Rashomon, and
Uh-huh.
for the normies that haven't seen Rashomon yet, it's a movie about perspectives and how we want to frame ourselves as the hero of our story in a narrative and try to make up for the things that we lacked in things. And you don't want to watch Rashomon. I mean, you should because it's a great film, but watch The Last Jedi because The Last Jedi has the condensed version
Mhm.
of what Rashomon is, and I think that she's gonna like definitely play on that. I'm not sure if we're. I mean, it makes sense that we would have the full memory recap of what the quote unquote truth is, but I think that we're just gonna have like sprinkled in flashbacks of everyone's POV. Like we're gonna have May's POV of like the parts that are divergent, and her aspects that we didn't see in did I say May or OSHA? I meant May, but OSHA's
You
memory
said
that we
May.
saw. Okay, good. Uh, Names not my forte. We'll definitely see Soul's memory or of like what happens from his POV, and then we'll kind of get the payoff of like the truth, capital T truth, alleged. But that's just my theory. I hope I'm right, but
Maybe.
we'll see. But we'll see. Um, but I think that that's always strengthened by being anchored by the character whose memory it is, and I think that was kind of like the weak point for episode 3 for me was that it's isolated into only being the memory, and I think it would have been strong if it ended with just like Osha waking up or some small snippet to anchor it to the present and then tie it to the character whose perspective it came from. So I definitely think that we'll see what you're saying, that each episode title will pay off in a future episode and then have the full narrative arc of things. But yeah, I think the structure in theory works, but practice is frustrating. And I'm not saying that I'm not enjoying the show because I very much am. This is the show that I was looking forward to the most. All the shows that have been announced. So like I'm really enjoying the ride, but definitely think that it's frustrating. And like you said, this episode suffered from being too short. And while I will say that Star Wars is able to do something that Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon doesn't, which is pack a lot of story in a short amount of time. Where like all these like prestige HBO shows is like everything has to be over an hour. And it's like that's wonderful, but I also kind of half appreciated the expediency in which you can cram a lot of story and a lot of nuance into a shorter runtime, which we can have both. And I think this episode for sure should have had a lot more exploration because one of the things that felt flat, okay, maybe not flat, but I could have used a little more nuance was May's turn, right? And obviously,
Mm.
this is not a recap episode. If you want a recap episode, just go watch Star Wars Explained. He has a wonderful episode where he recaps it. We're not doing that. We're analyzing the episode and reacting to it and reviewing it. But when she flips with Kimir in terms of Kimir or Kimmer, like
I think it's Chimera.
Chimere.
I
Apologies,
think.
Chimere. Sorry, Manny. Sorry. I know you're listening. Chimere.
Shout out to Manny Jacinto. Hi, Manny.
He's one of the Triad fans. Anyway, sorry, I'm on the Basil Dazzle, not on the Jord Horde. It felt, I mean, it made sense, and I think it's really compelling because of what also happened to Osha, or all of a sudden she's feeling the force. So for me, like, it's that yin yang happening between like what their journeys are going, which for me is kind of like, are they switching light and dark? And I think that's really interesting narrative choice of having her all of a sudden drop her journey with the master to find her sister, but then her sister connecting to the force again, and all of a sudden being in proximity to the master, which I thought were very interesting kind of dualities, because all of a sudden Osha is with the master and May is with Kolnaka. So there's like that flip of like what side they're on all of a sudden. But it did feel rushed. Like, how did you feel about May's all of a sudden, abandoning of her journey, of her path of revenge?
I think it made sense within the like writing structure of the show. I think there were several lines towards the beginning of the episode um, from Master Soul talking about, I see that you, Osha, are kind of this soft spot for me. Like there is like, yeah, she's killed people, but she is still your sister. There is good in her, all of this hokey Star Wars bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And and so that is there. But at the same time, it's not like May is, oh, I'm a good person now. She's still screwing over Kymir like really comfortably, like effortlessly. And
Mm-hmm.
so that didn't bother me. What I felt like I wanted was just like a little more character moments, a little bit more of May getting to feel like I don't know, getting to see May interact with her environment or maybe her memories of OSHA or just kind of having these beats where I get to know these people because I like them and I like these designs and I like these character concepts, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to keep liking them more and on deeper levels. And I think May makes sense. I think it makes sense for her, like, logically to not want to uh kill Kelnaka because she's been worried about like she has her own concerns about fighting a Wookiee. Manny Jacinto in episode 2 is like, you're gonna have to fight a Wookiee, just kind of establishing to the audience that this is a difficult thing. Um, says that it's basically impossible to kill a Jedi without a weapon. If you if you don't kill a Jedi without a weapon, then your Sith Master is going to kill you. So it's like, of course she's jumping ship, but I would like a little more interiority from her before we get to that point, just so it feels really rounded.
No, I agree, and I think it's one of the shortcomings of having short, no pun intended, that you have a trade off of like how deep and nuanced you can get into how you're developing a character, and I think in that regard, also one of the things that has been developed that a lot of fans are theorizing is Kymir's character and Manny Jacinto's character,
Mhm.
which I have my theories on. I desperately want to hear yours because people online are just like, he's the Sith Master, and I'm just like, it can't be true. It would be too obvious. And if there's one thing this show has done, at least so far to an extent, it's kind of mirror Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi when he says this is not going to go the way you think. And I
Mhm.
think that if the and I'm not saying that Chimera would be a bad character to be the master or the apprentice or the Sith or whatever we're calling it, but to an extent, to me, it feels like too obvious. It's like, oh, well, I won't be disappointed because I think he'll do great as that character. But I also will feel like, we could have had a little more twists and turns to that, because right now it feels like it's very a direct line that they're pitching, which is why I think it's a red herring, and it's just like it's gonna be left field character, and we'll get to those theories in a minute. But I must know what you think about Chimere being the secret Sith.
I'm biased because I really like Manny Jacinto, and I really like his performance here. Like Kymir, I kind of felt this in episode 2, and I really feel this here. Kymir is played like he's an NPC in, like, Fallout or something, or
Mhm.
like the Elder Scrolls, where he's all of his line deliveries are really over the top. He gives tons of exposition, but he's kind of, like, really helpful, but a little
Mhm.
skeevy. Like, I think he is just so much fun to watch, and so if they made Manny Jacinto, whom I adore as a performer, if they made him a Sith character, a more important character to this narrative than it seems like he is, I would be
Mhm.
so very happy. And right after the episode yesterday, I was like, it's fucking Chimere. Like, you're not
Mhm.
fooling me. Um, and now I am coming around to it where I am kind of thinking, this show has avoided a lot of obvious answers. It hasn't wasted its time with, "Oh, no, they think that May is, or they think that Osha is May, and so she's like," they got they got that out of the way in about an episode.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
didn't think for more than about 10 seconds that Osha had killed Master Torben. Like, they could, later down the line, kind of have a reversal on that. There are ways in which you can still play with
Mhm.
those ideas and question what we've learned so far. There's a lot of room for that, but the show is not wasting its time. And
Mhm.
so if it goes in a different direction than the obvious one, if it invests a little bit of writing into making you think that it's Chimera and it's not, I think that is a really good decision. I don't know if it being Chimera is as obvious to people as like it I feel like it is to me. I feel like it's
Mhm.
really obvious, but like I watched the episodes with my girlfriend. She did not get why I was like, "Oh, it's that fucking guy." Like,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and I had to, like, I was like, "Well, he didn't do this, and he didn't do this." And, like, rewatching the episode today, I'm not as sold on it as I thought I was. Like, Pymir says he's gonna go get water. We see him getting water, like, he could've, but, like, it seems like Master Soul probably feels Kelnaka dying or
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
similar in the Force. That's after Chimere is strung up, and Chimere could have, like, gotten himself down, but, like, I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense for it to be something else. My crackpot theory is that I want Chimere to be the Sith Master, and Teeth is the Sith Apprentice, and so Chimere is the most important guy,
Yeah.
somehow.
I think I think
Maximum Manning.
I think you're onto something with the master not being the baddies right now. I think
Mhm.
I absolutely think that we're dealing with the apprentice with this season because it kind of makes sense, right? Everyone thinks that the master is the master, but really it's just like, oh no, always true there are a master, and it's kind of, since this show has already been mirroring episode one so much with a lot of the narrative beats that it's doing. I think it kind of makes sense for the ending to be a mirror of episode one, which is like, oh, who was killed, the master or the apprentice? And obviously we know that it's the apprentice because we're watching the movie, so we have God's POV on film and cinema. And the show is gonna be the same. We see that it's the apprentice that was killed, and then post credit scene or whatever, do a Marvel thing, and it's just a different, scarier helmet. It's just like, okay, time to find a new apprentice or what have you. So, I mean, hopefully I'm wrong, and it's much more interesting than that because I would love to be surprised. It's always better to be surprised because I feel like when a movie just does the thing that you thought it was gonna do, you're just like, huh, yeah, that's what I expected. It's always a little underwhelming when your theory is correct, at least for me.
No,
Um,
I agree. I'm not a professional narrative writer. There are things that I think would be good thematic decisions and, like, thematic directions that I want things to go. That's generally where I want to be correct about things, is,
mhm,
like, I'm reading it correctly. But I don't I'm not itching to know every plot twist until it happens. I
mhm,
like the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next. That's what
yeah,
I like about this show.
yeah. And in talking about things that we might not know what's going to happen next, I think the big question for either episode 5 or 6, depending on what they do with the next episode, because the next episode could just be a full memory episode, and we'll have to wait 2 weeks to see
That would kill me.
the fight. But it's gonna be Jackie, Soul, and Jord. And I think this show has not pulled any punches in terms of saying that we're in a new era. These are new characters, which means that no one is safe. And they have done that extremely successfully, especially with opening the first episode with killing Trinity right off the bat, which I was right about. One of the few times that I'm just like, okay, I was right about that. That's pretty cool. Uh, but someone will bite the dust, or many people will bite the dust, no pun intended, because there was dust in that force push. Um, and I wonder what your thoughts are about like and I saw this Alden Diaz posted about this, the meme of Walter White in the truck, and then he said like, oh, that feeling when Ned Stark fans when they see
Uh-huh. I
Saul
saw that.
say that you're gonna tell an important thing about their past. Um, who do you think's on the hook? Because we know people are gonna bite the dust in that fight. Who do you think is on the chopping block? And please don't say Saul.
I think a lot of these, like, they're named, but I think a lot of these, like, extras Jedi, um, a lot of them are done for. That's why you send all of these guys, right? Is so that
We
you
got
establish the threat.
the what's it called in Star Trek? Red shirts. So you go to
Yes.
we got to kill.
I I don't think Yord is on the chopping block for next episode. And the reason for that is that Osha has this interaction with Yord where she's like, I if push comes to shove, I'm not going to be able to take May down. Soul's not going to do it. I need to be able to count on you. And Yord is like, okay.
He's
I
like, fine.
assume there will be narrative payoff to that. So if that is not paid off yet, I don't think Yord is going. If that's paid off, anything could happen to Yord. But as it stands, I think that would be a little bit unsatisfying. I think Soul still has to be sort of emblematic of the Jedi failing through hubris despite trying to be good. I think Soul still
Mhm.
has thematic meaning in his character, and maybe not. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to talk to Osha the way he wants to. Obviously, I think
Mhm.
Osha's going to go a different direction, or she's going to get taken by May, or by Teeth, or by whatever. Or she'll run off with them because May will tell her whatever, or Teeth will tell her whatever. Sorry, I'm just calling him Teeth. Like,
That's
I know
what
people
we
were
all
calling
do. We
him
all do.
Darth Teeth. Now he's just Teeth to me. That's
The
what he
new
is in
one,
my notes.
the new one that I saw was a Smiley Ren. I think is the new one that I saw out there. Which I was like,
Smiley
okay,
Ren.
I
That's
vibe.
good.
Yeah,
I like that.
people. Hey, as horrible as the internet can be, sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes there's great
We
things out there.
sometimes we do it.
Yeah,
Um,
like
the
Yord
most
Horde.
vulnerable Yord
Like
Horde. Yeah.
I'm sure that
Um,
Swagman is very enthused that they did the heavy lifting for them.
yeah.
Just
Shout out to Hayden for doing Yord Horde. Now we
hell
have
yeah.
all suffered since.
Yeah, it's like,
Uh,
hey, where are my stickers? Eh? Like I hosted a panel celebration. Don't I deserve a sticker? Come on.
Yord Horde isn't about what you get, it's what you
I
can
guess.
give.
I
It's
guess. You're
about what
right.
horrible things you can impart onto the world.
You're right. You're right.
Um,
And I abandoned Twitter, so
yeah.
I abandoned that crusade. I guess.
You're missing all of Tommy
But
Stella's terrible tweets.
oh no,
Um,
I still unfortunately read
still
them.
kept abreast with those.
Yes.
Um, I think of the, like, named major secondary characters that could go out here, and it is actually the one I least want anything bad to happen to. I think Jackie does make a lot of
No,
sense.
don't say that. No.
I think it makes sense because she's had these really nice beats with
Yeah,
Osha.
you're right. You're
I
right.
think
It
it
makes
makes
sense.
sense because it would be really horrifying. I don't want that to happen. I would be happier if it didn't. I'm fine with feeling like it might happen and then it being like, no, she's fine. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I I do not care about that type of fake out. I care more about not killing off the likable young woman in the Star Wars show. Like, I
Yep.
think Jackie deserves to outlast Soul. I want to see her have to deal with whatever ends up happening to Soul, whether he dies or he has to come to terms with a bunch of stuff, or I want to see that. But as it stands, she's the only one that I don't have a reason that anything bad could happen to her.
You-
As much as I don't like that.
As much as I hate everything you said, you're probably right. You're probably right.
Yeah.
Because I've never, and when Jordan Horde happened, I was almost as surprised about the love that he got as much as I was surprised by the hate that Kiadimundi got for just existing. So it's very interesting to see like how fandom has found, and it's something that I want to counterbalance, right? Because we've been talking a lot about the negative, toxic aspects of fandom and how it's reacted to the show, but I think it's equally as important to say how great and wonderful and joyful and loving fandom has also been to the show, because we wouldn't have gotten Jord Horde without love for this character, and we wouldn't have gotten a Basil Batch or Basil Dazzle, whatever. I don't think the fandom's still
Basil
on
Batch
board.
is good. I haven't heard that one
We,
before.
I'm not sure that there's a consensus yet on what's going to be the fan club there. The Soul Patrol. There's a lot of wonderful fans out there that are loving it, and it's what Alex Damon said on when episode 1 and 2 came out: joy scrolling. And I think that
Mhm.
there is also a lot of that. So it's a show that has made me happy in that regard. It's just people enjoying Star Wars for being Star Wars. So if we just drown out the other half, we can just have fun for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the actual community of people who are enjoying the show and who are invested has been lovely. Like the conversations that uh Daughters of Ferrix patrons have a Discord server where
mhm,
we just talk about stuff. And the conversations that have been happening there on the show have been so much fun. So much fun to see what people have to say, people's guesses for things. I've learned a lot of stuff. Sometimes I will miss things in the show. Like sometimes I have trouble like understanding a line because I don't always understand like words spoken at me
mhm,
as well
mhm,
as I wish I did. And so someone will mention something and I'll get to go, I had no idea that that happened. And so I feel like continually with the discussions that are being had in good faith,
mhm,
regardless of whether or not you are really vibing with the show, you know, I found that episodes were kind of not hit and miss, but like I told you, like some of these have been a little bit unsatisfactory to me. Like I think these conversations are both worth having and really special. I think this is a special time. These are the best times to be a Star Wars fan,
mhm.
apart from I don't know, the bricks and screws of it all, right? Like apart from that kind of
Yep, yep,
stuff.
yep, yep.
The stuff
It's
that makes those sorts of people money.
it's one of those things where there was a time I remember when I was growing up and was getting like very into Star Wars and finished the original trilogy, and the special editions came out, and it was before episode 1 came out. I was just like, I need more, and the only thing that I had were those Ewok movies. And are they good? I mean, no, but I loved them because that's the only Star Wars I had. I'm just like, I would just go to Blockbuster, rent them every weekend, and just watch the Ewok films because there was nothing else. And if I think that that's the thing that we have to always keep in perspective, we live in a amazing time to be a Star Wars fan because you have so many books, so many comics. We have Young Jedi Adventures, you have Bad Batch, Clone Wars, Rebels, Obi-Wan. You have like so many avenues in which to dedicate love for it, that it's for me mind-boggling that a couple of 30, 40, 50-year-old white men are still clinging with their with a death grip to an idea of Star Wars that actually never really existed, and just embrace that it's wonderful to just have more. You might not like it, but there's more, and there was a time in which we didn't have any, and there's so much variety that you can just find the thing that connects with you. And if nothing else connects, hey man, there's so many other things. Go watch Rebel Moon and watch those
Sure.
Snyder Star Wars ones. And if you love them, more power to you. It's
Well,
just love
it's
things.
like if you don't like if you're a person who's like, I'm satisfied with these 3 films or these 6 films, if you genuinely don't want more,
That's fine.
cool.
Yeah,
Go
watch
go
them.
watch them. And then if you are a person who really wants more, well, you're not gonna be happy with anything. Like, I am of the mind that we have not gotten a single Star Wars show that is bad.
Hmm.
Like, I think we're pretty lucky. I think even the stuff that hits it for me the least has value, is interesting, looks
Hmm.
good, or is worth talking about, or et cetera, et cetera. But, like, I'm a person who enjoys having more Star Wars, who really likes that there are shows coming out.
Hmm.
And I know that if I want there to always be shows coming out as it feels like there is right now,
Hmm.
I am not going to be 1000% happy. I'm not gonna get to mythologize whatever story as being this quintessential Star Wars thing. Like, people have already started doing that to Andor, treating it
Hmm.
as this, like, paragonal Star Wars text,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like, I am a massive Andor advocate. I've gotten multiple people in my life to watch it, just
Mhm.
evangelizing about how good it is. Before it even started, I was like, this is going to be the show. This is going to be the thing that people look back on in a couple of years and view as the thing. And then it was really good. And I was like, cool, I was right. I named my show after it.
Mhm.
And now I will take every opportunity to tear Andor down a peg
Mhm.
because I don't think it helps us to put any Star Wars on a pedestal. I will say things like, "I wish it did this arc better," or "treated this character better," or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because 1, I I don't think anything is, like, perfect, and 2, I genuinely don't believe that when we start to because we Star Wars fans cannot be normal about Star Wars, especially about new Star Wars,
Mhm.
we are not served by taking the thing that we think is excellent and use it as a measuring stick. I think we can
Right.
use it as a, I want more this direction. But as soon as we're like, well, it's not Andor, it's like, okay, I don't
It wasn't meant to be.
another
Right.
Andor. I don't like my favorite Star Wars movie is The Last Jedi. I don't want another The Last Jedi. What would that even mean? You can't
Mhm.
you can't make Blazing Saddles today. Everyone would look at it and say, "That's Blazing Saddles."
Right.
Like, I genuinely like, if you don't want more things, you don't want more things. Enjoy the stuff you have. If you do want more things, more means a different thing, like a different
Mhm.
entity, and that's fine. Like, do you want more or not? I'm not saying you have to like everything. I don't like everything, but you have to come to terms with the fact that you might not.
Mhm.
Or that it might not be a thing that is as for you as you were hoping. And that's not comfortable. It's not fun. And I hope that I can avoid the most uncomfortable aspects of that in my fandom, but that time might come for me. That time might come for you, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
I mean, it's just called it's called life, and
It's called being an adult,
it's called
Goose.
growing up. Yeah. It's like one of those things that's just like, hey, it happens, and it's one of those things that we have to just do it gracefully. I think grace is apparently not something that most people care to have. But in speak before we like wrap up completely, I always like to speculate a little bit because what would we be if not rabid Star Wars fans that are always thinking about what comes next because we're never grateful for what we have. We're always looking towards the future. And we've talked a lot about Saul's guilt. We've talked about May and Osha maybe switching places. We've talked about Chimera maybe being the Sith Master. We obviously finished this episode with a massive cliffhanger. So, what do you either expect to see or hope to see in the show going forward, either in next episode or the series as a whole as it progresses?
I think Basil is a turncoat.
Oh, don't!
I
He's too
think you can't
cute.
trust
No,
that little rat.
no, I,
He's an
I,
otter, isn't
I
he,
have to.
really?
I don't know, but I disagree. He's too cute. I was so upset when Pip just like sprayed water on him. He's just trying to be nice.
Pip knows something. It's like when a dog smells
Hmm.
smells your boyfriend and is like,
Hmm.
"That guy's bad news," and you don't listen to him for, like, 6 months or whatever, and then you're like, "I should have
I
listened to
guess
you." Pip
ducks
knows
know.
something.
Ducks know. Ducks
Pip
just
can
know.
smell it on him. How
Fair,
did
fair.
Kymir find Kelnaka the first time? I don't know.
Don't you put
No,
that
m
seat now?
maybe Basil's a turncoat? I don't know. I'm if he's not, it's whatever, he's just a little rat man.
Maybe he's just doing
Um,
his job. He got
he's
paid
just
for a
doing his
job.
job. You know, unless he's got a non-compete clause in his contract, it is his right to work for
Right.
whomever he needs as an independent
And as
contractor.
long as he didn't wear the creepy mask, he's in. How would he have no?
We're 110 years before the Jedi start including you cannot work with the Sith clauses
Yeah,
in
exactly.
their contracts, which the Kaminoans were in direct violation of. No, I don't know. I don't trust Basil. but who knows? I think there's a decent chance that May is going to stay put in Kelnaka's house, and something whatever bad is going to happen, and Sol is going to have to touch base with May.
Mhm,
Um, I hope that whatever happens to Osha is a choice that she makes.
mhm,
If she ends up going with Teeth wherever Teeth goes, or hanging out
mhm,
with
mhm,
Kymir, or staying with Soul, I hope that is an active choice that
mhm,
she is making within the narrative. I think it will be, but I don't know. I would prefer that than she gets taken captive, but that feels boring.
mhm,
Um, and I want Soul is this character. So, Soul is the heart of the show,
mhm,
right? Soul is so good. I believe that Soul is acting in good faith. I
mhm,
believe that Soul is a fundamentally good. I want Soul to have to learn a lesson. I don't know what that lesson is, but I feel like the fundamental flaw of the Jedi at this point is that they are trying very hard to do good, to the point where it's kind of biting them in the ass, and I want
mhm, mhm,
Soul to have to not just be destroyed by the mistakes that he's made, not just pay. I don't want him to pay, I want him to learn.
mhm, mhm,
And,
mhm.
you know,
Something that
he
is
might lose.
difficult with Star Wars.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of learning, just a lot of dying.
Well, it's very difficult for the Jedi, because the
Mhm,
Jedi have to be on something of a downward trajectory, but if Soul personally is able to evolve, he might lose a lot. He might lose Osha, or he might lose Jackie, or lose them in like a less literal sense. He might not be able to connect with them anymore. He might lose the respect of Vernestra. Anything. That's fine. But if Soul sees some kind of fall, I that's not what I want to be the end of him. I want it to be in service of something, in service of him as a character.
mhm.
And um I don't know. I hope that's the direction that we're heading. Um, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I definitely don't want Soul to bite the dust because I don't want them to go that Game of Thrones route because I feel the show it's Star Wars and I feel Star Wars is about learning truths and accepting them and growing from them. And I think that I mean he says it right to Osha as they're going into the confront the hut. He says like you're not confronting May, you're confronting your past, and we both are. So I think there's a reckoning that all three of those characters are going through, and I think that May's already begun her journey of confronting it by deciding that she's abandoning her path of revenge and turning herself in. And I think that now it's Osha's turn to confront that. Well, May is flipping into light, and I use that cautiously. I think Osha might be doing the opposite and turning into darkness. I mean, especially with that scene with the bug, and because of her, the bug died, and that's when she got her started to reconnect with the Force. And obviously, like I was saying before, the inversion of like who is in proximity to who. All of a sudden, May's in proximity to Jedi, and Osha to Sith. So I think that there's going to be like a role reversal, especially with seeing how Kalnaka was obsessed with the witches, the witch clan's logo, which is basically a space Star Wars space yin yang. I feel that we're gonna explore that. It's gonna be a parent trap situation in which they're gonna just explore each other's opposite journey. So we'll see. But I hope that it involves Soul finding balance with himself so that he's able to find both of the twins balance for each other and not die because I really like Saul because he's my Qui
Soul
Gon.
is the Soul is the only one of those four Jedi who are responsible for Brendok left.
Hmm.
What does that mean? You know? Does it mean he's the last one to die, or does it mean that, you know, I don't know. I don't know if he gets redeemed. I don't know if he I hope I hope where he ends up means something with regard to that.
And I like that you use the word redeem because I specifically think that he is the one that did the most egregious thing for what happened that night at Brendock, because it definitely feels like he's the one that's carrying the most guilt, and the reason that he maybe is wants to make things right for both of them the most, because he probably is like unwilling or not, willingly or unwillingly. I think he's like the catalyst for things going wrong, and that's why he has the most guilt, and the atonement just feels like it's necessary there because he has to be the one to heal it. But we'll see. I hope I'm just excited to go on this journey, and I just don't
May
want
I,
Soul's journey, end in catastrophe.
may I make a prediction?
Please.
One final prediction. In episode 2, Chimere makes the very sithy point that peace is a lie, right?
Hmm.
Torben's supposed peace in meditation, specifically with regard to Torben, is a lie. It is a lie that he is telling himself, just like the Jedi
Hmm.
tell themselves this lie of their peace. And
Yep.
what Torben needs is absolution. And this is sort of, seems to be true. May goes to Torben and says, if you take this poison, I will forgive you. And Torben, in his sheer need for absolution,
Hmm.
kills himself. I think Soul views Brendock as his fault.
Hmm.
It is very likely that he is correct. I think Soul, like all of those Jedi, will will have to take responsibility for it, but also let it go.
Hmm.
I think Soul is going to have to, if not forgive himself, then just allow it to sit. I think Soul needs to stop seeking absolution because he keeps doing this. He keeps saying, Osha's my fault, I need to deal with her. May's my fault, I need to deal with her, and getting himself into these worse and worse and worse situations.
Hmm.
I think he has to let go of that in favor of peace, whatever peace looks like for him.
Right.
And I hope the opposite doesn't happen because that seems like it would be a real buzzkill, but who knows? Anyway, that's what I hope.
And who knows? Maybe all of us are wrong, and just season one ends on a big old cliffhanger before anything happens to any of these characters.
In that
But
case, I'll point people to this video in 3 years when season 2 is coming out.
oh no,
And
please! Hopefully they fast track season two, because I really like you said. I feel that the only show that we have currently is Mando, that is kind of carrying through as a continuous series. And while we are getting a season two of Andor, it's kind of capping itself out. And it would be nice to have
uh
a show that's completely different from both of those also continue. And I think Acolytes would be like a wonderful show that's just, at least to me, still feels fresh and exciting, but still familiar. And I think that's gonna be really fun to see how it just continues to grow, either forward in the timeline or backwards in the timeline. Maybe it's an anthology. I don't know, but I definitely want more High Republic and I want more Acolyte. But we'll see. There's
I
only
agree.
we're already on the halfway point, so only 4 more episodes.
Oh,
Wild to
only
think
4
about
more
that.
weeks.
But anyway, as always, we could be talking about this forever because we are Star Wars fans and we obsess about almost every single detail except birth dates. Maybe each other's, because I think each other's are more important because we're humans and
Mhm.
we must care
Yeah,
about
stop
like
worrying about
our
Kiadi Mundi's
birthdays.
birthday
Care about your
and
best
worry about
friends,
your mom's
your
birthday.
moms, yeah. Put it on your phone so you don't forget your dad's,
Yeah.
everybody's. But yeah, before we wrap up, thank you for joining us. It's been such a wonderful conversation, as exciting and engaging as I was hoping it would be. But before we wrap up, tell us a little bit more about Daughters of Ferrix, what you guys are up to, what we can expect from you in the future, and anything you want to plug about what what the projects you have going on.
Uh, Daughters of Ferrix releases every 2 weeks. Last week we did an episode that came out with Molly and Alex from Star Wars Explained, where we
I
talk
know them.
about the High Republic. Good folks all around. Where
Hmm.
we talk about the High Republic and its relationship to sort of Golden Ages and Arthurian legend and Camelot and JFK's presidency. Before that, we did an episode, like a pet project of mine, about Mon Mothma's wardrobe, very specifically.
Hmm.
Our next episode is one that I am editing right now, and it is about. I will tell Triad of the Force listeners exclusively. It is
Oh shit.
about um the we've all heard the Star Wars Vietnam comparison.
Hmm.
It's about that. So I'm
Interesting.
very excited for that to hit the ears, hit the
But
ears of our
I was gonna
listeners.
say airwaves, so we don't have airwaves anymore. The digital
Yeah,
waves or
yeah.
whatever,
I was also
however
gonna say
the
airwaves.
internet, however the internet works.
Hit the internet tubes.
The
Yeah,
Ethernet cords. Yeah.
you can find Daughters of Ferrix by searching it up on any old podcast platform. We're also on YouTube, Daughters of Ferrix, uh, at Ferrix Pod for most of the platforms. We're actually not on Threads.
Join the
You
party.
might
It's lonely.
you might have convinced me. I'll do one for the podcast. And you can find me, Ellie, at the Letter Bomber on most stuff.
And we will definitely be leaving links for all of that down in the description below. So please make sure to follow them. They're wonderful. And if you like this conversation here, you'll get a lot more of that over on their channels. So please, please, please make sure to follow. But with that, thanks so much, everybody. We have been Triad of the Force. If you liked this episode, the previous episodes, or are looking forward to future episodes, please make sure to leave a like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those things that allegedly boost the algorithm. If you want to be positive, if you want to be negative, I mean, I'm sure you can boost our algorithm too by engaging and leaving hateful comments. I'll just ignore them. But please feel free to boost the algorithm. But as always, thank you so much for listening. May the force be with you and for light and life.